Hello gainers, welcome to my channel called Fit of Philosophy. I'm Ralphie, the host and the narrator here, and I talk about Stoic, philosophical, experience-based observations, advice and other practical stuff. And I'm actually going to start a new theme on this channel, something I've never really talked about in much detail before, and it's to do with the main job I've had in my life. I did the job for over 20 years, and I started back in the 1980s, so it's quite a while ago. A different world, actually, a different reality in many ways. In some ways more innocent times, and other ways definitely not. But I'd start by saying that we all make plans in life, but we should never forget that life makes plans for us. And this happens more substantially and significantly than people will generally admit. So I'm starting a new series on the Fit of Philosophy channel called Death Stories or Funeral Stories. I'll call it Funeral Stories, because when engaged in the business of death, so much of it is about life, because the two are simply inseparable. And I'm going to talk about some of the characters that I got to know briefly, and yet in their own way they had a significant influence in my attitude and perspective in life. And the first person I'm going to talk about, and this was back in the 1990s, many years ago, so it's a sensitive topic to discuss, and I have the experience to know that and deliver appropriately. But I'm going to share some of my historical perspectives on being a funeral director and the people and circumstances I encountered. And I'm starting with this first funeral story, the story of Amazing Grace. Not her real name, of course, although she's long gone now, and there's no family as such. So, but I changed the names just to preserve the dignity of the circumstance. It's something I'm very much aware of, is that there is no dignity in death save for the dignity that we bring to it as humans. This is important, because to respect others is to respect oneself. Again, this is something else which is inseparable. You can't respect others and disrespect yourself. That's harder. You can't respect yourself but disrespect others. Although there's a difference between disrespect and keeping a distance from others who have no respect. It's just the journey of life. But let's get on with the story of Amazing Grace. Grace was an old lady. She lived a quiet life. She was briefly married in her youth to a man who was killed in the Second World War. And as a consequence, because of the endearing and endearing nature and depth of that love, she never wanted anybody else in her life. Not, by the way, an unusual situation. This is the tragedy of war. It is the ritual sacrifice of humanity for no good reason. That's what war is. It is the most acute form of a species self-harming for the benefit of forces they barely understand. Take note. Grace was, although we never spoke, she was a remarkable woman. She'd been patient in her life, working in an office all her years, and putting aside her nest egg and getting on with things. The relatives, of course, saw that nest egg, as happens. So when she had a tumble in her kitchen in her late 1980s, in her late 80s, sorry, they were the first to suggest that she go into a nursing home where she could be properly looked after. She gave herself quite a bruise, apparently, when she tumbled. But it was, in Grace's opinion, attributed to the blood pressure medication her doctor had put her on, which was too strong, that lowered her blood pressure too far, and she passed out and banged her head on the kitchen table as she went down. At which point the cousins became more insistent that she went into a nursing home because they didn't want the embarrassment of her dying alone in the house. And that was their mindset. So she thought it through and decided, well, I'll delay my decision for the moment, but I'll get a home help. And she got a home help who stole from her. One provided by the district council. Personal items went missing, money went missing. She complained, she was told, you know, you've got to have absolute evidence or you're making false accusations. In other words, her situation wasn't taken seriously and she was fobbed off. So she discontinued with the home help. Around the same time, her neighbour downstairs, because they were in a split level house divided into two flat apartments, typical of the East End of Glasgow, and her neighbour moved into a nursing home, so that flat became vacant and it was occupied by a young mum with 3 children. Now, the young mum had come from Newcastle, where she had been abused by her partner, but had tolerated it for many years for the sake of the children, until she discovered her partner was abusing, or hitting and smacking the children, particularly when he was under the influence of alcohol. At which point she reached out for help, and fortunately at that moment in time, these things were started to be taken more seriously, and she was offered help in the form of a women's refuge. She accepted it, and as part of the support, she was invited to move to another city sufficiently far away that she could be away from the abuser, who wouldn't know where she was. So she accepted that and ended up as Grace's downstairs neighbour in the East End of Glasgow, where she settled in. She quickly got a part-time job in the local supermarket as a cashier on the checkouts. But the children, they were struggling a little bit actually, because with the aggression they'd got off their father, they were taking it out in the local school, because, well, the 2 boys were, there's a daughter and 2 boys, 2 sons, because they struggled to get to make sense of the local dialect. Their dialect sounded straight. So obviously there was tension, they were picked on to a certain extent, but they fought back. And this started causing a lot of problems for the mum. It was Grace who went downstairs and said, right, I tell you what, let's occupy them, let's get things busy for them, let's get the 2 lads down to a local boxing club, which is where they went to control their aggression, to get an outlet. And of course at this point, these young lads were in an environment where they had, for the first time, a positive, powerful male role model who was teaching them self-discipline, getting fit, proper nutrition, self-respect, and it did them a huge amount of good. Obviously the fact that some of their pals from school, the folk they knew at school, were in this boxing club, it changed the dynamic, and any bullying both ways stopped. The daughter, a lot quieter. The older daughter, she was in secondary school. She fitted in very well. In fact, because of the absence of the domestic violence, and because her mum was doing so well, she started to really come on academically. And Grace saw this, and it was Grace that started helping her save in the bank to cover university fees. By the time that young girl got all her A grades from school, she was going to the local university as a day student with several £1,000s backing her up. So once she got her part-time job in a bar, she was able to cover her costs and not get into student debt. The mum, of course, she's got a stable job now. She's not looking for another partner, though she had a few boyfriends, but that didn't really work out. But her real friendship, her real bond was growing with Grace. Now, Grace is in her 90s at this point. And Grace has become essentially the matriarch of the family. And in return, Grace is being looked after by her home help down the stairs, who's cooking her meals, vacuuming her flat, doing messages for her. So they had a tremendous mutual beneficial rapport going on. It was Grace that organised and paid for the holidays, that she joined her friend, her family now at this point. She took them on holiday. Occasionally they'd basically just go in, if it was summertime, they'd do a bit of camping. Nice big tent, very comfortable. The boys would do a bit of fishing. And she loved the flowers. She loved wildlife. She loved the outdoors. And here was a purpose to get her out there, to get her into the environment she'd always been aware of but had never really engaged with. So what you see here is a developing, growing positivity between two families coming together to create one family because of the recognised mutual benefit and the positivity that accompanied it. When I lifted Grace out her bed, she'd passed peacefully away in her sleep onto the solid frame covered stretcher that we use to transport people out of houses, because in the modern world people are big and houses are small. There's no room for a coffin in many occasions. So you use a solid frame cover stretcher, and notice how what in physically good condition she was. Unlike many elderly people who hit their 90s, her toenails were immaculate. In fact, her toenails were actually painted because her family looked after her with such meticulous attention to detail that they gave her beauty sessions. They got the hairdresser in to do her hair. She was in very good physical condition for her age. At the end, it's just her heart gave up on her. But she had a good run, particularly in the last 10 years of her life. It was, in many, many ways, a golden sunset. And for me, I knew nothing about her until I was lifting her as the funeral director, as the undertaker, with the hearse driver, out of her bed, onto the stretcher, down to her funeral premises, organising her funeral, sitting in the crematorium at the back, listening to the eulogy of her life story, and how much of her life was fulfilled towards the end of her years. And it was a beautiful thing. I was quite moved by it. because don't presume for 1 minute, never assume this, that when someone passes away, they are immediately surrounded by bereaved people who are going to miss them. That is not the case. There are some families who are relieved to see a relative go, and there can be a number of reasons for that, including positive reasons, but there's negative reasons. That there was someone there to actually personalise and give a fitting tribute. Because for many elderly people there isn't. There's no one who cares. And worst of all can be the families. They can be the least caring of the lot. They want the money. They want their inheritance. And they want to get it over and done with. I mean, I've had families who, and this happens regularly, they've arranged a holiday, another holiday, and the funeral will have to wait till they get back from their holidays. And I've had families who have extended their holidays to delay coming back from a funeral. And I've had families who remained on holiday and the funeral took place with no one in attendance. Because some people out there, they don't give a damn. They honestly don't give a damn. And it really jumps out at you. You really notice this. The whole spectrum of human reactions to someone passing away, to someone dying. From utter indifference to genuine bereavement, and then at the other extreme, contrived, theatrical, attention-seeking bereavement. I've seen that as well. You don't forget this sort of thing. But I have to say, early on in my funeral directing career, the story of Amazing Grace was quite inspirational to me. And it has, without doubt, it has affected my life in a very small but substantial way, because nothing lets you know more about life than death. And nothing informs you more about death than life, because the two, after all, are inseparable. They're completely codependent. I'm going to conclude by introducing some of my funeral day relics. This is my cane that I used when I was conducting funerals. The silvery knob is rather worn off with use over you can see a little bit of silveriness there. But I would use these conducting the funeral just to direct traffic, just to calm down the speed of the cortege when I was walking and proceeding in front of it, away from a house, church or funeral parlour. These are the gloves that were absolute necessity in winter time, because a hearse can be a very, very cold place when you don't have much of a heating system in it. And here's my top hat. Here it is. There's some things you never let go, because they're part of your history, they're part of who you have become, who we have become. It could be a fireman's hat, it could be a policeman's hat, it could be a doctor's stethoscope round my neck, it could be so many people do wear uniforms. But this was mine, a Victorian legacy, the top hat, very Dickensian. This is what we wore as part of the funeral provision. And I have in fact a book published, you'll find it on Amazon. It's called Life, Death and Whiskey. And in it, by me, Ralphie, I talk about my many stories about people I met, some dead, some living, in my career over 20 years, 21 years actually, as a funeral director. And you can find it on Amazon. Good ratings as well. And what I'm going to do is, in more funeral stories, I'll talk about some of the characters in this book and give you a little bit more detail on them. I hope you've enjoyed this. It's a little bit of a change. Some may find it morbid, but you shouldn't, because you can't deny the undeniable. And one of the secrets of life is not to be so obsessed by death that you don't live life properly. That's just the way it is. See you soon.